Welcome to No Longer Conformed. We are studying the book of 2 Corinthians, God's Messengers. In this session, we'll be looking at 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 16 over to chapter 9 and verse 5. Stewardship of God's Messengers, part 2. God's messengers are faithful stewards. Stewardship is the management of another's goods. Remember in 1 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 2, moreover, it is required in stewards that one be found faithful. In our last session, we considered giving with the right motive. We saw that motive in verse 5. They first gave themselves to the Lord and then to us by the will of God. The second of Paul's messages is giving with the right attitude. What is the right attitude? Well, look at chapter 9, verse 5. A matter of generosity and not as a grudging obligation. Sadly, much Christian giving is from stinginess. The small town had one bank and 3 churches. Early one morning, the bank called all 3 churches with the same request. Could you bring in Sunday's collection right away? We're all out of $1 bills. Yeah. Our text, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, and verse 16 and forward, helps us see a right attitude, reflecting 4 concerns of faithful stewards. First, they're concerned for God's people. Look at verses 16 and 17 of chapter 8. But thanks be to God who puts the same earnest care for you into the heart of Titus. For he not only accepted the exhortation, but being more diligent, he went to you of his own accord. You see, Titus had great concern for the Corinthians. His earnest care for you. He went to you of his own accord. Where did Titus get this concern? Well, he got it from God. Look at, again, verse 16. Thanks be to God who puts the same earnest care for you into the heart. You know, those times when during the course of the day, I have come to my mind a person. Maybe it's you. And I take that as an urging by the Lord for me to pray for that person who's come to my heart, come to my mind. You see, because Titus was concerned for the believers, he accepted the mission with the right attitude. Faithful stewards are concerned for God's people. And second, they are concerned for the church's testimony. Look at verse 18 down to verse 22. And we have said with him, the brother whose praise is in the gospel throughout all the churches. And not only that, but who was also chosen by the churches to travel with us with this gift, which is administered by us to the glory of the Lord himself, and to show your steady, ready mind, avoiding this, that anyone should blame us in this lavish gift which is administered by us, providing honorable things, not only in the sight of the Lord, but also in the sight of men. And we have sent with them our brother, whom we have often proved diligent in many things, but now much more diligent because of the great confidence which we have in you. Paul sent a special group to Corinth. Titus, partner and fellow worker, verse 23. The brother whose praise is in the gospel throughout all the churches, verse 18. With who was also chosen by the churches to travel with us with this gift. Verse 19. With them, our brother, whom we have often proved diligent in many things. Verse 22, many scholars believe that the them that's mentioned there are Luke and Timothy. Why did the apostle send such a special trio? So that the handling of the collection would be above any suspicion of misuse. Look at verses 20 and 21. Avoiding this, that anyone should blame us in this lavish gift, which is ministered by us, providing honorable things, not only in the sight of the Lord, but also in the sight of men. You see, it's not enough for one's financial accounts to be honorable as God sees them, but they should so be kept that men see them as honorable as well. Faithful stewards are concerned for the church's testimony. And third, they are concerned for the church's example. Get verse 23 down to chapter 9, verse 2. If anyone inquires about Titus, he is my partner and fellow worker concerning you. Or if our brethren are inquired about, they are messengers of the church, the glory of Christ. Therefore, show to them and before the churches the proof of your love and of our boasting on your behalf. Now, concerning the ministering to the saints, it is superfluous for me to write to you, for I know your willingness, about which I boast of you to the Macedonians, that Achaia was ready a year ago, and your zeal has stirred up the majority. Paul put them to task in receiving the brethren, verses 23 and 24. If anyone inquires, if our brethren are inquired about, proof of your love and of our boasting on your behalf. Why is this necessary? Because Christians often zip their pockets closed when the offering is taken. It takes great courage to stand by representatives of a great cause before stingy saints. Paul puts them to task in being a positive example. Verse 2, I have been boasting about you. The Macedonians have been motivated, and most churches have reacted to your zeal. Paul didn't need to write, but he did anyway. Verses 1 and 2 there. Faithful stewards are concerned for the church's example. And fourth, they are concerned for the church's reputation. Look at chapter 9, verses 3 through 5. Yet I have sent the brethren, lest our boasting of you should be in vain in this respect, that, as I said, you may be ready, lest if some Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared, we, not to mention you, should be ashamed of this confident boasting. Therefore, I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren to go to you ahead of time and prepare your generous gift beforehand, which you had previously promised, that it may be ready as a matter of generosity and not as a grudging obligation. Apparently, that church was slow in the giving, and Paul had been bragging on them so much. They had made a pledge a year earlier. Word must have gotten back to Paul that the offering wasn't doing very well, lest our boasting of you should be in vain, lest if some Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared. So much boasting, it would be embarrassing to the church, and Paul's word would lose trust. The apostle hoped they would become ashamed of not paying their pledges. Verse 5 is key. Therefore, I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren to go to you ahead of time and prepare your generous gift beforehand, which you had previously promised, that it may be ready as a matter of generosity and not as a grudging obligation. It's about generosity versus grudging obligation. Some offerings exhibit covetousness on the part of the giver by their stinginess. Faithful stewards are concerned for the church's reputation. You give all that some thought, and your giving, and you have a great day.